Released in 2001 for the original PlayStation, Koudelka is one of those strange, brooding little relics that slipped through the cracks of the early survival horror boom. Developed by Sacnoth and published in the West by SNK, it arrived at a time when comparisons to Resident Evil were inevitable, and frankly, unavoidable. Yet Koudelka isn't quite survival horror, and it isn't quite a traditional RPG either. It's a gloomy, eccentric hybrid that feels like it was stitched together in a candle-lit crypt somewhere in rural Wales, which, as it happens, is precisely where it's set. The game opens in 1898 at Nemeton Monastery, a crumbling abbey tucked away in the Welsh countryside. Our heroine, Koudelka Iasant, is a young Romani woman burdened or blessed with psychic powers. She's drawn to the monastery by unseen forces and almost immediately finds herself entangled with two other unfortunate souls. Edward Plunkett, a charming but slightly roguish treasure hunter, and James O'Flaherty, a gruff bishop with a tragic past. It's a rather theatrical trio, and I mean that quite literally. You see, one of Koudelka's most striking features is its presentation. The cutscenes are lavishly produced for the PS1 era, fully voiced, motion captured, and delivered with a distinctly stage play sensibility. The script is surprisingly literate, occasionally purple, mind you. And the voice acting, while uneven, has a sort of earnest gravitas that suits the setting. Edward, in particular, veers between dashing and daft, sometimes within the same breath. There are moments where the line readings are oddly paced or faintly melodramatic, but in a way that adds charm rather than detracts from it. It feels human, imperfect, a bit wobbly around the edges. Graphically, Koudelka adopts pre-rendered backgrounds reminiscent of Resident Evil, complete with fixed camera angles and gloomy corridors. The monastery is rendered in oppressive browns and sickly greens, all rotting wood and damp stone. It's not the most varied environment. You will see quite a lot of corridors, but it's undeniably atmospheric. Shadows cling to corners, candles flicker uneasily, and there's a tangible sense that something is deeply wrong in this place. However, unlike Resident Evil, Koudelka features fully 3D character models that engage in turn-based combat, and here's where things become complicated. Combat takes place on a grid system within the same environments you explore. When an enemy appears, usually something grotesque and vaguely ecclesiastical, the game shifts into a tactical RPG format. Characters have limited movement per turn. Attacks are governed by range and positioning, and accuracy is determined by stats rather than player reflexes. It's a bold idea, blending survival horror tension with RPG mechanics, but the execution is somewhat uneven. For one, the battles can feel sluggish, animations are slow, and the pacing occasionally drags. You might find yourself waiting just a bit too long for a skeleton to finish shuffling forward before it takes a swipe at you, and the random encounter rate can be a tad relentless. Exploring a new hallway sometimes feels less like creeping through a haunted abbey and more like queuing at the post office, except the queue keeps biting you. That said, there's genuine depth beneath the surface. Weapons level up individually through use, spells grow stronger the more they're cast, and characters' attributes increase based on how you play them. It's an organic system that encourages experimentation. Do you turn Koudelka into a spell-slinging psychic powerhouse, or give Edward a hulking great hammer and let him thump things into submission? The choice is yours, though the difficulty curve occasionally makes that choice for you. And speaking of difficulty, Koudelka can be surprisingly punishing. Weapons break. Health items are scarce. Boss fights, in particular, can feel brutally unforgiving if you haven't prepared properly. There's a sense that the game doesn't quite explain itself as clearly as it might. You're expected to muddle through, to experiment, to fail, and try again. It's very old school in that regard, for better and for worse. What truly elevates Koudelka, though, is its tone. This is not bombastic horror. There are no jump-scare dogs bursting through windows. Instead, it's a slow, oppressive dread that builds through dialogue and implication. The narrative delves into themes of guilt, redemption, and the scars of religious fanaticism. The monastery isn't just haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by history, by cruelty and repression and unspeakable experiments. There's a rather fascinating interplay between the three main characters. Edward's levity clashes with James's stern moral code, while Koudelka herself often serves as the emotional fulcrum between them. Their conversations feel surprisingly mature for the era. There's wit, tension, even moments of vulnerability that genuinely land. It's not flawless, some exchanges meander, and occasionally a line delivery feels just a bit off, like someone missed their cue, but it's ambitious. properly ambitious. Musically, the game opts for sparse, moody compositions rather than bombastic orchestration. Long stretches of near silence are punctuated by eerie strings or low, rumbling ambience. It complements the setting beautifully. You're meant to feel alone, slightly uncomfortable, perhaps a bit unwelcome. And you do. Of course, being a late-era PS1 title, it comes with the usual trappings. Load times can be noticeable, inventory management is a bit clunky. Character models, while expressive in cutscenes, look somewhat stiff during gameplay, and the translation occasionally produces phrasing that feels, well, unusual. Not wrong exactly, just slightly askew, but somehow that only adds to its peculiar identity. In hindsight, Koudelka feels like a bridge between genres. It predates and directly connects to Shadow Hearts on the PlayStation 2, sharing characters and thematic DNA. Yet it stands apart as a more somber, introspective experience. Where Shadow Hearts leans into dark fantasy with flair, Koudelka remains grounded, claustrophobic, almost theatrical. It's not a game for everyone. Those seeking slick pacing and streamlined mechanics may find it frustrating. The combat can feel laboured, the backtracking can test your patience, and yet there's something oddly compelling about it. A sincerity, a willingness to take risks that larger franchises might have avoided. Playing Koudelka today feels like uncovering a forgotten manuscript in a dusty attic. It creaks, it groans, it occasionally trips over its own feet, but it has soul, and quite a lot of it. In the end, Koudelka is an imperfect gem. A horror RPG that doesn't entirely master either half of its identity, yet manages to carve out a distinct space all its own. It's bleak, thoughtful, and just a little bit strange. And frankly, we don't get enough games like that anymore. If you can tolerate its quirks, and perhaps forgive the odd awkward pause or slightly wonky mechanic, you'll find an experience that lingers long after the credits roll. Not because it terrified you senseless, but because it unsettled you, quietly, persistently, and sometimes that's far more effective